Hey, Tlaquil to everybody. Good evening. Kenike tenema aman. How are you? Hello, how are you? That's a greeting from the Guerrero region. People who speak Nahuatl there. Um, again, that's if you want to say good evening, you say Tlaquilte. And then hello, how are you? You say Kenike teneme aman. Okay, so I just wanted to reinforce the greetings that we learned in the first lesson, just reminding you there are a lot of different ways to greet people, and we do it very specifically, and it's very, very different from Spanish. Okay, so that's the whole point of this lesson series, is trying to use Nahuatl to understand the worldview. And so lesson 3, today we're going to be looking at the types and the meanings of names of the Teteoh, or otherwise known as the Aztec gods. Okay, so here you have a few. And so we're going to look specifically at the different ways that names are constructed, but we're going to try to use the etymology of Nahuatl to really understand what these names actually mean, because a lot of times there can be a lot of confusion. People will be like, oh, the Mexica were polytheists. Other people will say, oh no, they're atheists. And then, still other people will say, oh no, they're pantheistic. And then you have the Ometeo crowd that say, no, they're monotheistic, right? So a lot of interpretations. Fortunately, if you look at the etymology of the names, it actually gives us some really, really deep insight into what they actually are, what they actually are referring to. That's what we're going to do today. Also very important to be able to pronounce these, that they'll properly, right? So we're going to look at the proper pronunciation as well, and make sure, these are very, very sacred words. So we want to make sure that we're pronouncing them correctly and giving them the respect they deserve. Speaking of respect, we'll start with the first type of like a part of the Teteoh name that you might encounter. And so that's seen. Now you may notice there's a little hyphen. That means that this is going to be at the end of the words. Okay. Whenever you see this, it's sometimes added to the names of Teteoh, but it's also used in, normal discourse. It means reverence, veneration, profound awe and respect. Normally, it's in a sacred context. So that's the meaning that we're going to work with whenever we see it attached to a Teteoh. But you should also know that it can mean something small, something diminutive. Okay, so there are some contexts where you might use that, like tochtzin, for example, like, oh, that means like a small rabbit. But in this case, it's not small, it's something to be respected. And here are some examples. I know this was very controversial because every time I mention her name, people get very, very angry. But you have Malinche, as the Spaniards called her. Her given native name, this was given to her by the Nahuas who were talking with her, and Hernan Cortés. They called her Malintzin. Malintzin. There was a lot of accounts where Hernan Cortés would get really upset because people would call her, people would just ignore him, and they want to talk to her. They didn't really care much about him. And so that really irked him. And then the fact that they gave her this respectful name, Sin, right? And not for Cortés, that made him even more upset. But yeah, this is real. This is 100% historically accurate. We're talking about, like, for example, the Spaniards were working really closely with the Tlaxcalteca, for example. Like those Tlaxcalteca, they like when they would talk to her as she was translating for Cortez, they would refer to her as Malintzin. And that's not just a title that anybody gets. It's a very special title, and it means that somebody really thinks highly of you. Okay, so that's Malinche, Malintzin. And then you have Nantli. Okay, this is our mother. Okay, so this is like you're going from mother to our respected mother. Okay, so if you want to give extra emphasis on that, you would add a sin. Tatli is father. Then you have tatsin. Tatsin, same thing. You're adding that to show that it's your, highly respected father. And then, in modern days, a lot of people refer to Cuauhtemoc, who's the last Tlatoani of Mexico Tenochtitlan, right when it fell, or he helped defend Mexico Tenochtitlan against the Spanish attack. He led the defense of the city. Today, his name you might encounter as Cuauhtemoc, because people, feel like he's somebody to be really respected for what he did. So those are some examples of sin. Now this word, this is a really, really important word. If you look at the dictionaries of the time, they always say that it means Lord. And this is a really unfortunate definition, because when you think of Lord, I mean, what is a Lord? A Lord is like a ruler of a fief in Europe, right? Like they had the feudalism system back in the 1500s when the Spaniards arrived in Mexico Tenochtitlan. And so the only thing that they could come up with that was the same as what they were encountering here is a lord. They say, oh, this is like a lord, someone in charge of the lands and that the peasants work and things like that. So it's unfortunate, I say, because it just gives that connotation, right? Like that we had feudalism here, and there were peasants and serfs and things like that, and knights and kings, right? And so I don't really like that definition. But you know what? When we're looking at these words, if you like, a lot of people think that words related to like the Teteoh are no longer used, but that's not true. Modern Nahuas use these words, and they're the best people to ask. I looked at the dictionaries and it says Lord, but I asked some Nahuatl speakers, and they all said the same thing. They said this is a person with social authority. So I said, okay, well, what are some examples that you would call somebody with this name? I haven't pronounced it yet because that's going to be a little tricky. But they said, oh, we refer to our bosses at work like this. Maybe any government official, right? Any mayor or anything like that, or an elder. Okay, so any person with social authority would be called this word. Okay, um, in the historical documents, Moctezuma was referred to as this. Okay, so the Tlatoani would have this title because, of course, they have social authority. Now, how to pronounce this? This is actually the classical spelling that, of course, we talked to, or I talked to you about how the spelling of these words is really important. And the Inali spelling, I always use the Inali spelling. So I'm going to give you the Inali spelling. I just put this one here because most people wouldn't recognize this word. but most people have seen this word. And so this is the Inali spelling. Um, and it's pronounced different in different ways. So basically there's a pronunciation that's closer to how they pronounced it back in the pre-Columbian times. That pronunciation is still preserved this in the areas that are closest to Mexico City today. Okay, so those people would pronounce it like this. Now I'm gonna go ahead and play this, but they're not actually pronouncing this word. They're actually pronouncing ilama in front. So just ignore the ilama for now and just try to focus on this. Turn my volume up just in case. So they're saying Teocli, 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 Teocli. Not the easiest pronunciation. In fact, I think this, of all the sounds, I think this one might be the most difficult. Most people would just say, oh, it's this. If you pronounce it like Spanish, they'll say, oh, Tecutli, it's Tecutli. But one way that we know that's not correct is there are no U's in the Nahuatl language. Anytime you see a word with a U, that is actually supposed to be an O. Okay, so there are words today that are pronounced with the U, but it's actually O. Now in this case, it's not O, but it's actually supposed to be like this. So in the modern Nahuatl variant of the Huasteca region, they won't say it like this. They won't say it like Taucli. What they do is they say Tec, Tecli, Tecli. Okay, so they put a little bit more emphasis on that K. Of course, there's a W there, so that's just acknowledging that it's not just a regular K. It's like Tec, Tecli, Tecli. Okay, so most people would probably prefer that pronunciation because it's a little easier. That's the thing about the Huasteca Nahuatl. A lot of the rules are very simplified like that. And, you know, as a result, a little bit easier to learn. Okay, but the central varieties will probably sound a little bit more like this. So either pronunciation is correct. You know, there's no variant that's superior to another. Those are just the two different ways to pronounce it. So go ahead and pick the one that you like the best. And then we have this word here. So this is Teteoh. Teteoh. And you know, with this word, you have all these scholars racking their brain trying to figure out what this word means. I've seen so many different definitions, some that come to mind. Some scholars say, oh, Teteoh is a god. Teteoh is a god, right? That's the most common translation that you'll see. And you'll see that also in the dictionaries from the 15 and 1600s. They'll just say God. But other scholars say, oh, well, you know what? It's actually like a concentration of sacredness. Or they'll say, oh, it's something sacred. Some say, oh, it's a sacred energy. And then there's this guy, there's this philosopher, his name is Jim Maffei. You probably have heard of him. He wrote a book called Aztec Philosophy. And he argues that Teteoh is a pantheistic entity, that everything has Teteoh, okay? And so there's so many different ways to define it. And people have heated conversations and arguments about this. Again, I did the simple thing and asked Nahuatl speakers how they would define it, and they gave me the clearest answer that I've ever encountered for Teteoh. And so it's something or someone that is powerful beyond human capabilities. Some people might say, "Oh, that doesn't that just mean supernatural or something?" So yeah, I guess that would work, but I'm just sticking with the exact words that were given to me by Nahuatl speakers. And this definition is probably the best that I've seen. Um, you know, so we'll let the scholars argue amongst themselves, and we'll just go with this definition. Now, the Nahuatl speakers were very clear that a teot is usually somebody who was alive and they died. So like something like a hero or something like that, someone who did something really, significant beyond human capabilities. And so, we have these, there's these stories, a lot of these Teteoh, they have, there's stories that the descendants, like a lot of these Teteoh were, if you look at the stories, there are actual human beings living on Earth. So there's a lot of different stories about like Quetzalcoatl, for example. A lot of people know about that. Se Akat Topilsin, right? That's one example. Huitzilopochtli is another example. He was an actual person. He was the person who was leading the group that later became the Mexica and formerly were the Azteca. He was leading the Azteca out of Aztlan, and so he was the leader. He said, "Hey, we have to go find our new home," and at some point he died. And when he died, the people gathered his bones and they wrapped his bones up and they carried his bones with them everywhere they went. And so if you're carrying bones around of somebody, that person is typically going to be a teot, okay? Because he was so powerful, he did things that normal humans couldn't do, that they kept his bones. And what they would do is they would hide them, near the Teocalli or the pyramids, or just somewhere safe, because it's like it was considered to be like a concentration of power. Um, so they believe that the Huitzilopochtli was there. He was still there guiding them. In fact, if you look at the codices, there's a codex, Butterini, I think it's called. It's Italian. And throughout their travels from Aztlan to Mexico, they're actually talking. Huitzilopochtli is shown like talking to them, even though he had already died. And so that's how that works. So a lot of these Teteoh were actual people that died and then became Teteoh. I told you in the first lesson, there's a word for that. That's called Teoti. So if you do something so great, you can eventually become a Teoti. Same thing with the women who died in childbirth. They became Teot when they died because they did something so great. And there were stories where the warriors would go and dig up their graves to try to get a part of their body, usually the hand, the left hand specifically, and they felt like if they were able to get that body part, like all of the power that they now held would also be in the hands of whoever had it. And so that was something that was related. I want to show you. This is a church in Guerrero. Okay, and they purportedly have the bones of Cuauhtemoc, who is the last Tlatoani. So I just wanted to show this to you because it's it's kind of following the same practice that I just told you about with Huitzilopochtli, right? So that tradition of carrying the bones and venerating the bones, taking care of them, is still alive. So check it out. Sorry about that. I'm going to show you the bones are held. There they are. Okay, so you can't see it too well, but this is like the best shot I could find. Right here, there's like a glass case, and there's bones. You can see some of the bones there. And there's a little depiction of Cuauhtemoc here. Okay. And so some might argue because of this, maybe Cuauhtemoc has also became a Teteoh because he's so highly venerated by people. You should know that these bones are it's very controversial, but back, I don't know, over like 30, 40 years ago, some scientists in Mexico, they were really interested in the bones, and they said, hey, let us test the bones just to make sure that that it's really Cuauhtemoc. And so the caretaker said, okay, sure, yeah, go ahead. And I mean, they were convinced they were Cuauhtemoc's bones, but the scientists concluded that they were not Cuauhtemoc's bones. In fact, they were the bones of like several individuals, female, male, and various ages. Somebody had just got the bones and just kind of, put them together. And so that's pretty crazy. But all these people, most danzantes, I would say, to this day, still believe these are his bones, and they go and there's like pilgrimages to go and venerate them. Okay, so there's that. And then you have, I'm going to show you another Tlatoani. This is a Tlatoani of the Mixteca region. His name is Eight Deer. And Eight Deer is the most important person in all of the Mixteca books. In fact, most of the Mixteca books that we have reference his life. That's how great he was. And so he was a ruler just like Cuauhtemoc was. And one of the books here, I have a video lesson that goes page by page if you're interested in learning more about his life. But this is the Codex Natal, and this is showing all of the different cities that he was able to take over. So you see there's like arrows stuck into all the hills. That's just signifying Eight Deer, took them over. And he's a really important figure because he kind of united the Mixteca cities. Now, something really amazing happens in this codex that, is really unique. I've never seen it anywhere else. But where is he at? Here he is. This is him. Eight Deer. This is his brother. Okay. And it's Eight Deer because you can count the 8 dots and then it's a deer symbol. What's happening here, this right here is the sky band. Like this area is the sky band. So they are actually ascending. They've done so many amazing things in their lives that they're literally ascending. They're going up to the level of the sun. Now, humans cannot access the sun, so this is doing something powerful beyond human capabilities. And so it's amazing that they're actually showing this because it's actually like he's becoming a Teteoh. If he can go here, he's becoming a Teteoh. This is Tonatiuh right here. This is literally the sun. Okay, and the sun is giving him gifts. Look at what he's wearing. This is Eight Deer right here. You see he's wearing ceremonial clothes. He's bowing his head. He's being very respectful. He's in front of literally the sun right now. The sun is on his jaguar throne, and he's the sun is giving him the authorization, you know, to be the official ruler of the Mixteca, but also, you know, have access to the region of the sun. And so this one is really cool codex. I recommend you check it out. You'd have to subscribe to be a Patreon if you want to see it. It's in the Patreon list, my other lesson series. But his name in Nahuatl, we say 8 deer, but in Nahuatl it would be Chikoe, Masat, and then Teoti. This means 8 deer is becoming a Teo, and that's what exactly what's happening here. So if you wanted to describe that, that's how you would describe that. Okay, so I gave you various examples. I hope you understand what we're talking about when we're using these three different words. Okay, so you have, I'm going to just show you some of the Tsin, Tekli, and Teo based Teteo names. First of all, we have Tonantzin. So maybe you're wondering, oh, why is there Virgin Guadalupe there? You know, what's going on? Some of you may know, some of you may not, but today she's referred to as Tonantzin. And Tonantzin is our respected mother, okay? There are some people who think that Tonantzin is a teot, a particular teot in pre-Columbian times, but there's actually not any particular teot that holds this name. Like, you know, there's no distinct image or anything of a Tonantzin. It's clear that Tonantzin is more like a general title. If you ask modern Nahuas today, they will say that they will use Tonantzin for any motherly figure. Okay, so like for their own mother, or their grandmother, for example. They say, oh, Tonantzin, right? So some woman who's like who cares for the people, they'll call her Tonantzin. Okay, so it's important that we know that Tonantzin is a title. Okay, it's an actual title, and so you can use it for if you want to talk about Tlazo Teot, for example. You know, she's a female Teot, or if you want to talk about Tlatecutli, another female Teot, or Ciudadlique, right? Like all of these, you would use Tonantzin. Okay, so that's just an example of a teot that utilizes that scene at the end. Looking at the totality of them, scene is actually pretty rare. This is the one example I could find. Then you have Tekli. So this is Tekli here. So this one is a little bit more common. Here's the Inali spelling, Tekli. So this is a picture of him. He's Tonaka Tekli. Tonaka Tekli. Okay, so the Tonaka part is there's an ending. Yot is referring to our sustenance. In modern day Nahuas would refer to Tonaka Yot as their harvest, their crops. So he is the Lord, or we could say he's in charge. He has a social authority over our sustenance. Okay, something like that. Another possible translation is our Nakat. Nakat is our flesh. So the Lord of our flesh. So it could be either one of those would work. But I think they kind of mean similar things. But that's an example of Tekli. So he's a Teot because he can do things that people cannot do. But even though he's a Teot, he's got that Tekli, which again is very common. Here's another one. This is Ilama Tekli. Ilama Tekli. Ilamat means old woman. Technically, of course, someone with social authority. So the old woman with the social authority is what that word means. She's closely associated with the stars. So she's the mother of the stars. And it's really interesting because this word is actually still around today in the Nahuatl region, specifically in the Huasteca region. There's a word. It's called, it's a word. Let me type it here. They say, it didn't work. Okay, so they say ilamatzin. And what that means, they use that word whenever somebody sits like this, because the old women traditionally sit like this. It's like they're crouching down like this. And like if you go to the marketplace, the tianguis in Mexico, you'll see them sitting like this, the old women. And so it's just like a traditional way of sitting. So it's so interesting to me that the people today, they still use this, and it actually means an old woman. If you say ilamatzin, usually you're telling somebody, hey, you're sitting like an old woman. But this scene at the end, of course, gives it that respect. So it's kind of like saying, you're not making fun of them. You're not making fun of the old women, right? You're just saying ilamatzin, like you're just making an observation, like you're sitting like an old woman, you're crouching down like an old woman. So that's an actual phrase that is still used today. It's really interesting because, man, all these years later, look, this is from a codex, this image, and for them to still sit in this fashion, but also identify it with the Teteoh name, that's really remarkable, I think. So Tlazoteo, there's another one. So Teo is in the name. This is Tlazot. Tlazot comes from Tlazoli, which is a waste or trash. Like today, it would be in modern Nahuatl, it would be like trash. Teo, of course, someone with power beyond human capabilities. Okay, so Tlazoteo has the ability to get rid of waste and trash. Then you have the noun-based Teteoh names. Okay, so they just have nouns, usually two nouns put together. Here you have Huitzilopochtli, I referenced earlier. Huitzili is a hummingbird, and Opochtli means left or left-hand side. So it means hummingbird on the left, which doesn't really, it's hard to make sense of that. Like, what does that mean, hummingbird on the left, right? Like, what is the left? What is he doing on the left side? There's a linguist named Magnus Farrell Hansen. He has suggested that it might be like this O might be an error, right? And because if you take that off, he says that Huitzilopochtli means the youthful hummingbird. Okay, so he makes that proposal and might be that. So a lot of these words, they're very, very old. So a lot of times they're open to interpretation like that, especially when you're trying to make sense of what it means. So that's an example of two nouns. Here's another example. Mish comes from mishli, which is cloud. So this is cloud, and this is goat, which is a snake. One thing I'll mention that's really, really important. You see these two nouns are combined. So when you combine nouns, you're going to drop the ending of the first noun only. And what happens is the mishli part is actually modifying the goat part. So we're saying it's a cloud serpent, or you can think of it like a serpent that is like a cloud. would be another way of thinking about it. The cloud-like serpent. Okay, so it's the mishli that is modifying the snake. Now, if they were switched, for example, like if it was koa mishli, the snake would be modifying the cloud in that case, and so you would say it's a cloud that's like a serpent, or a snake-like cloud. Okay, so it just depends on the order that it's in. Here's a really fascinating one. This is ti ti mi me. Ti ti mi me. Ti ti mi me. Okay. This is a word that's still used today. It, if they call you a ti ti mi, that means you're a pissed off person. You're very cranky. And so this person looks pissed off. This is titsimit. Me is plural, so that means that there's more than one pissed off person. So we learned in the previous lesson, the colors lesson, that if you add that tik at the end, it means that something that has become like that. So if you say titsimitik, that means that somebody has, somebody's in a bad mood. Somebody has become pissed off. So these are, again, like Ilamatekli. Ilamatekli is like the mother of all of the stars. These are all the individual stars in the sky. So this is what the Mexica envisioned the stars to look like up close. And they felt like the stars were pissed off because they were always attacking the sun. Whenever there was a solar eclipse, it was perceived that the sunlight was being blocked because the stars were literally attacking the sun. And so obviously a pretty terrifying time if that's what you're thinking. And then they're, after they attack the sun, the Time come back to Earth and then, you know, eat everybody and kill everybody. So they're pretty terrifying that they'll, and so yeah, the sun were, the stars were looked at as negative as a result. A lot, I mean, everything related to the night, it has a similar vibe. All right, possess noun-based Teteoh names. So now you have nouns, but you also have nouns that are possessed. And so this one is Tezcatlipoca. Tezcatlipoca. It's Tezcat, mirror, plus he, she, it owns, plus smoke. So if we're looking at the literal translation of this word, it literally means the mirrors smoke, because this part is what is owned, okay? And what is owned, you have to know what is owned, who owns it in Nahuatl. You have to look at the word before it. So this is saying that the mirror owns the smoke. I'll write an example here so we can understand that clearly. If I say my neighbor Juan, Juan Ichan, similar concept. This is Chan for Chantli, which is house. So it says that's Juan's house. That's Juan's house. So same thing happening here. The only difference, of course, is this is not a person, it's a mirror. So it's kind of unique in that sense. Usually if something is possessing something, it's not going to be like an object, but yeah, so it's actually a pretty unique way of writing a name. But of course, there's images of Tezcatlipoca. We know this is what Tezcatlipoca looks like. So you have, when you look at Nahuatl words, you have to look at the context as well. So we have the mirror is here on his foot. This is Tezcatlipoca's Nahuatl, his jaguar. So Tezcatlipoca has the ability to transform into the jaguar. And so you know it's Tezcatlipoca because, well, it's got his little necklace here, but it's also got the smoky mirror on the bottom. Okay, so that is the mirror. And so the connotation, looking at the context, we can say that the mirror is, the smoky mirror is owned by Tezcatlipoca. So we just kind of have to infer that, right? But literally speaking, it's the mirror's smoke is how that would be translated. Then we have Chalchiutlique. These words are sometimes difficult to pronounce, and if you find the reason why they're a little difficult is because I don't know if you noticed this, but the suffix, the ending, is not dropped, so it turns into a more like a longer name. Like for example, and if we're speaking now, we would say Tescat. So we say Tescat first, Tescat y Poca, Tescat y Poca. That's how we would say it ordinarily, like Juan y Chan, Tescat y Poca. But because they're sacred to Teteoh, for some reason their names get like you just put it all together and smash it together as a personal name. But since you can't ordinarily do that, like it's kind of like breaking the rules of Nahuatl. You have the suffix remains. So instead of Tescat y Poca, it's Tezcatlipoca. So it changes the pronunciation as well. So it's just something special about the Teteoh. They get to break the grammar rules. So you have Chalchiutlique. If we were not smushing them together, it would be Chalchiutli Ique. A Quayit is a skirt. Quayit is a skirt. Okay. And so what they're saying is the precious green stone. This could be referring to jade or turquoise or any precious green stone, but those are the two that come to mind. Again, like Tezcatlipoca is saying that the precious green stone owns the skirt. Okay, so you got to look at the context. So this is Chalchiutlique. Okay, so Chalchiutlique has a skirt on, and so we can infer that it's saying that her skirt is a precious green stone. Okay, so yeah, these verb or the possessed nouns are a little more complex as a result. Now this one throws a wrench in it all because this is coat ique, or if you smush them together, the suffix remains, so it's coatlique. And in this case, she does have a skirt of snakes. You know, so it makes sense. Like what I was telling you about the context, right? Like you got to look at the context. Well, she's got a skirt of snakes. Well, she also has a head made of snakes. So this is like this is like a big snake, right? This is Coatlicue as a snake. There's a story where her head is cut off, like, and her head, in the place of her head, the snakes grew. So that's what that's referring to. But it's interesting that it's still in line with what it's saying, right? Like it's saying the snake owns a skirt. Well, this is a snake, and that's the snake's skirt. But again, we can also interpret it, which is the most common interpretation, is that she owns a skirt of snakes. This one is really interesting. This is one of my favorites, and I was so happy to find out that Macuitonaleque is still used today in the Huasteca region. let's break this down. Makwili, I didn't write it down, but Makwili is a number. It means 5. Okay, so that's Makwili. The li is dropped. So these are, go back. These are verb-based Teteoh. No, sorry. This is still possessed nouns. My bad. Okay, so still same concept. Possessed nouns. So let's see, what are they possessing? Well, you have the 5. The tonali is in this case referring to days. It's plural because there's 5 of them. There's the 5 days. The makwi tonaleke are the owners. This e means ownership, and ke means there's more than one. There's plural. And look, if you look, there are more than one. There's exactly 5 of them. These are all considered to be the makwi tonaleke. Again, I have a great lesson on the makwi tonaleke that it gets really deep, and it's a really, really important concept to learn. If you want to check that out, check out my Patreon library. It's in there. But this means the owners of the 5 days, the owners of the 5 days. So these are all the owners. The 5 days that they're referring to are actually here, 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 and here. So the amazing thing is they're literally they're talking about literal tonali, they're literal days in the calendar, the tonal puali. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You always count the first symbol as a 1. 1, because what it's doing is it's trying to tell you what is the trecena, what is the beginning week. Okay, and then you count with the spacers from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so they're all in the 5 positions. And it turns out that in the pre-Columbian times, the makwi tonaleke are, and look at this, you have a handprint on their face. Why hand? Well, there's 5 fingers on the hand. So the 5 is also referring to the hand at the same time. And that'll become clearer when I tell you the Nahuatl, the modern Nahuatl perspective on this. But back in the days, if you were born on one of these days, that means that you'll be prone to excess. Okay, you'll be prone to excess. The Quetzalcoatl is closely associated with the sexual organs, and so in the old days, if you were born on this day, you would be susceptible to having too much sex. And these guys, the makwi tonaleke, would cause the negative associations of that. So like excess sex might lead to like venereal diseases, right? Or some other problems that you may encounter. It's going to lead to a lot of problems. And like in our culture, like excess was looked upon it very poorly. Like we wanted to avoid excess as much as possible. And so there was always going to be negative associations with it. This is 5 flower. The flower is associated with the arts, but also like gambling and things like that. Anything that has to do with fun, or the arts like performing, and all of that kind of thing falls under the flower. So 5 flower, if you were born that day, that means that you would be addicted to gambling, or you wouldn't know when to stop partying and having fun and that kind of thing. And so yeah, they all mean different things. Those are just some examples. But the reason why I'm telling you this in such detail is because they have a second name. It's also verb. This one is actually a verb-based name because awia means joy or to have fun. When you're having fun, you're awia. You're participating in awia. So it's the awia Teteoh. So they are the 5 Teteoh in charge of pleasure and having fun and joy. So it's really interesting because they're acknowledging, like, if you do this in excess, that, I mean, yeah, it's gonna be really fun when you're doing it. You know, you're drinking, you're partying, you're gambling, you're doing all of those things in excess. It's fun, but at the same time, there's going to be some negative consequences. And so these guys you would pray to, give offerings to, if you wanted to heal yourself from whatever the consequence was from your actions of having too much fun. And so in the modern in Huasteca region, it's really cool. Um, this concept is still alive today with your hand. Like, if you're going to do something really, really important with your hand, the Huasteca people will look at their hand and they'll talk to their hand, and they'll say, okay, my makuitonaleke, and you're referring to your hand. My makuitonaleke, you're gonna help me do this. You're gonna give me the power to do this, right? And so it's amazing because, like, yeah, it's like the hand is very closely associated with them. You can see it on their face, and it's still around today. Like, if you're gonna help give birth to a baby, for example, you're a midwife, you would do that. You know, you'll talk to your hand, the makbitonaleke, because you're gonna massage the baby out, and your hands are gonna help you with something really, really important. So whenever you need your hands for something important to do, you're gonna talk to your hand as the makbitonaleke. I think that's just a beautiful thing, that concept is still around today after all of these years. You know, so again, just because the modern Nahuas are Christian, a lot of them are Christians, yeah, they're Catholics, and they venerate the Virgin and Jesus Christ and all of that. It doesn't mean that all of these concepts just went away. Like, these concepts are still there, and they come up in a lot of different ways. You just got to look for them. And so, yeah, that's the power of having the language, right? Like, if you have the language, there's no way that these things can die, because it's your entire worldview, and that's why it's so important to understand the language component of all of this. All right, verb-based Teteoh names. We have Tonatiu. Tonatiu. I'm just going to remind you here, because this is not a common spelling that you would encounter. Most of you would encounter it like this. And most people will pronounce it Tonatiu. Tonatiu. But again, there's no U. There's no U in Nahuatl. This is a W sound. It's a W. So it's not Tonatiu, it's Tonatiu. Tonatiu. It's a W sound. Okay, Tonatiu. You can hear how that's different from Tonatiu. Tonatiu. Okay. And so this is the sun. Oops, let me go back. Sorry about that. This is a depiction of Tonatiu in the Codex Borgia. My favorite depiction of him. He's amazing. So it's the sun. He's red, the sun, and then he's always got the golden hair. Tona is heat. Ti, it, we, it goes along. So this means that it, Tonatiu, the sun, goes along, giving off heat. Okay, so it goes along giving off heat. So that's the literal translation. And so you want to there's a lot of spiritual components in this, but at the same time I want to point out that there's a lot of science in here as well. Like, it's science and spirituality put together, right? And so it's just the acknowledgement that the sun is the source of heat, and the sun goes along, it's moving in the sky, and our ancestors were were tracking that in their calendars and daily lives. And so it's a really, really important concept. But is it a sun god? I wouldn't say so. People would say, oh, Tonatiuh is the sun god. In my perspective, I wouldn't say that. I would say, well, no, it's just the heat that goes along. It's the sun's heat. And so we all have different perspectives on it. But I think that this name here really lends itself to, to the scientific component of it. And then you have another verb. This is another one of my favorite that they always, he's got obsidian right here and on his face. This is supposed to be obsidian, his face, and here on his hat. Okay. And you'll notice that the obsidian is curled. It's curled like a question mark. Well, that's actually a part of his name. By the way, he's white because he's the frost. Okay. He's the ice, the frost, the dew in the morning. That's him. So it's Itzla Colhuique. Itzla Colhuique. And so this is the classical spelling, if you're interested in searching it up. Okay, this is the Inali spelling. This, if it's Inali, this one should be an S, sorry about that. But this is Isli, which means obsidian. Tala is usually used in like weather observation. So it's like it's happening all over the place. Koliwi is to bend, and ki is the past tense. So it literally means something. Oh, no, it means the obsidian, not something. The obsidian is the subject. The obsidian that is bent all over the place, like all over the place, like all over the earth. So what they're talking about, another scientific observation, they're talking about the frost and the dew, like it's present everywhere, all over the place. So that's the general sense of it. Like the bent obsidian is referring to that. I got a great story for him. If you want to go look in my video library for my pre-Columbian Códices lesson, he's got an arrow stuck in his head because he was actually a previous Teteoh, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and he got shot in the head by Tonatiuh. Tonatiuh shot him, and he transformed from the previous Teteoh to this Teteoh. And this is a really, really, really important concept that one Teteoh can transform into another one. That's exactly what happened here. And so it's a really, really important concept. There's a story behind it, a whole story. So yeah, go check it out if you're interested, but he's one of my favorites. And then you have Xipetotec. Xipetotec, if you look at his pictures, he's got skin hanging off. Okay, and he's going to represent the spring. He's going to represent the spring, like renewal, that kind of thing, right? And so Xipetotec comes from Xipewa. Xipewa means peels it off. To tek is tekli, just without the ending. The ending is dropped, so it's tekli. So it's our Lord, or our Teteoh with great social authority. If we're looking at the modern day Nahuatl perspective, and not the 16th century Spanish feudalism perspective, so our Teteoh was a social authority, and then Xipe, so it's our Lord, or our person in charge, who peels it off. In this case, they're looking at the skin. The skin is peeling off. So you're getting rid of the old and you're going in with the new. All right, then you have the location-based Teteoh names. Some Teteoh are based off of locations. Tlaloc is a prime example. Oak is a location marker that refers to it's lying on top of something. So oak is on top of something. and tlali is the earth. So it's what lies on the earth. Well, what lies on the earth? Well, it's the rain, it's the water. And so that's Tlaloc. You can see him here dropping water onto the earth, just like his name says. And so that one's pretty straightforward. Although I should mention, a lot of people have heated arguments over this, um, and it's pretty clear if we're looking at the etymology, what it means. It's just that which lies on the earth, which is the rain or water. Okay, and then this one is the Teteoh that turns into Itzlacolhuique, the frost, the one that I was showing you earlier. So he turns into Itzlacolhuique after he gets shot in the head. So this is before the sun, Tonatiuh, shoots him in the head with an arrow. This is what he looks like before that. This is actually the planet Venus. Okay, the Venus at times shines very, very brightly next to the sun. Our ancestors were very, very interested in Venus as a result. They said, "What? Why is Venus getting so close to the sun? What's happening?" Right? Same thing with the stars. Well, it must be trying to attack the sun or overtake the sun. And so in the story, that's kind of what happens. Like they're shooting arrows. He's shooting arrows at Tonatiuh. He misses. Tonatiuh gets mad, shoots an arrow, and gets him right in the head. Boom, just like that. And he transforms into Itzlacolhuique. This is a very, 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 very important concept in our culture overall, because his name, by the way, is Tlahuizpan Tecli. Tlahuizpan Tecli. Okay, which means shining light in the morning. He's the Lord of the place of the shining light in the morning, which Venus at times rises with the sun. So that's what that's referring to. But Venus was perceived to be something that contained heat, like the sun, which interestingly, if you look at the planet Venus, it's the hottest planet of all the planets, mostly because of its carbon dioxide atmosphere. It's even hotter than Mercury, and Mercury's closer to the sun. So again, the science is really amazing to me, that they saw heat, and it definitely is a very, very hot planet. So they're correct about that. And so when he gets shot in the head with that arrow, he dies. He loses his heat. And so when you lose your heat, like in our tradition, like you're dying, you die. As you die, like that's the definition of dying. You're losing your heat, and then you become cold. Mictlan is a very cold place. It's like the night, right? There's no sun there, so it's an allusion to that, to life and death, and how life is associated with heat, and how death is associated with cold. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful representation. Check it out if you want, Tlahuizpan Tecli, and you can see the whole story. Then you have Micteca Siwat. I really love this name. This name is really, really interesting because the white scholars will say, "Oh, she's the wife of Mictlan Tecli." I really hate when they say that. A lot of people who believe in polytheism, like to say that she was the wife. There's no indication that they were married or anything. It's just there just happens to be a lot of pairs, like a female and male pair. But it's not always the case. Tezcatlipoca, for example, does not have a female companion. So I know some people argue, oh, there's a female and male energy for everything, but that's not the case. Some Teteoh do not have female or male counterpart. In fact, some Teteoh have male and female components put together. So you want to remember that Nahuatl it's not a gendered language like Spanish, and so we don't really say you know, we don't really identify any gender really when we're talking about these things, um, unless it's explicit, which in her case, it is very explicit because there's Siwat, which is woman. Okay, so Miklan Tekli is, I'll just say, because I don't like husband, I'll just say companion. Companion in Miklan. Miklan is the place of the dead. And so this one's clear what it means. I hope you know by now, this means like the Lord of Miklan. And that means that he has that social authority over Miklan. And if you look at the stories, that's definitely the case. Quetzalcoatl came to Miklan to try to get the human bones, but he had to get permission each step of the way from Miklan Tekli. Miklan Tekli was in charge of Miklan. Say, oh no, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. You know, Quetzalcoatl had to follow the rules, and so that's why. Again, that's what the meaning of Tekli. Now here, there's no Tekli, but the Siwat part is kind of like alluding to the same thing. It's like she is in charge. A lot of times they would use Siwat, you know, for a woman in place of Tekli, but they kind of mean the same thing. So she's the woman in charge of the Mixteca. Notice how it's not Miklan. Mixteca is a word that means the people, or not, yeah, the people of Miklan or the residents of Miklan. If you want to see a plural version, it'll be like this. Plural, so it's kind of like Mexica. Mexica means many, Mexica, and then Mexicat means one Mexica, same thing. Okay, so you have the Mixtecat is a resident of Miklan. The Mixteca are the residents of Miklan, and she is the woman in charge of them. And so again, these are referring to specific locations. So they're in charge of the realm of Miklan. Obviously, even though they have Tekli in their name, humans cannot go to Miklan, and so it's we know immediately that they're Teteoh. Here's another one, Patecat. This is from Patlan, which is the place of medicine. Patli is the word for medicine, and so he's a person from the place of medicine. Okay, so we know it's from the place of because it's got that that ending, like we saw here, the Mixteca, the Pateca, the people who are from Patlan, the place of medicine. Then you have, so remember, even though it's like referring to a person or a resident, they're still Teteoh, right? Because they have access to parts of the earth and universe that we don't have access to. So that's key here. Okay, so you have, so again, it's possible that he was a real person, right? He was a real person who lived. He was so great with medicine that he died. They kept his bones, and eventually he became a Teteoh. Okay, so that could have been what happened here. Then you have this one. This is Texis Tecat. Texis Tecat. This is the classical spelling here. Classical, and the Anali spelling. For the longest time, I wonder why is there two C's here? It's weird. Why not just put one C? Well, it's because this one is the K sound and this one is the S sound. So again, another example of why the Inali spelling is way superior to the classical. Tek, sis, teka. Tek, sis, teka. We look at that, it's clear. This one, it's not clear. How do we pronounce that? Okay. So this is just a resident of the land of conch shells. Look, he's got a conch shell in his head. So he is a resident from that place. And so he's actually the moon. He's the moon. If you want to look at my my pre-Columbian videos, if you want to look at the winter solstice video, there's a story about him. He um, he was very rich. He had quetzal feathers. He had the finest cotton, the finest jewelry. However, when it came time to jump into the fire to become the sun, he was hesitant. He was scared, and so as a result, another person, Nahuatl, jumped in and became the fifth son, the current son, and then he jumped in after, and because he was a coward, he became the moon instead of the sun as his punishment. So that, and then one of the Teteoh threw a rabbit at his face because they were upset with him because he was not brave like Nahua. And so that's why the moon does not shine as brightly as the sun. Great story, check it out. But that's Texisteca. Interestingly enough, there is a place called Texistlan that still exists today. It's in Jalisco. And not only is it in Jalisco, but it's in the coast. It's in the coast of Jalisco. And so it makes sense, doesn't it, that it's a conch shell or seashell because the city is located near the sea. So there's so many connections that are still around all of these years later. You know, like these cities they still have their original Nahuatl names, and then we can still connect them to, you know, the stories and the Teteoh. So it's all just kind of interconnected again, which is why the language is so important. Today it's an egg. If you say Texisli, talking about an egg in modern day variants. All right, so Texistecat was the last one. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I hope you learned the correct pronunciation, but also the etymology and the different types of names that these Teteoh can have. If you enjoyed this and you're enjoying the lesson series, please consider becoming a patron. I really appreciate any support that you can offer so I can continue to, you know, do the research that I need to make these quality videos. So thank you very much. Again, lesson 4 will be coming out pretty soon, so look out for that.